2 book videos in a row. Forgive me if you don't like to read. But I wanted to share all the books that I read in February. And I actually had a really good reading month. 7 books. I'm gonna start with the first book I read in February, which was Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. I'm not gonna talk too much about this because I did talk about this in my last video, but basically there's this young boy who leaves his home to escape his fate and destiny. And there's a lot of weird things that are happening in this book. It goes between 2 different narrators, the young boy and then this other old man. Lots of strange things happen. Fish fall from the sky. Talking cats. This was a really fun read. I actually really enjoyed it. Don't really have much to say about it besides that. I would recommend this book if you're interested in reading it. I really enjoyed my time. Moving on, the next book was probably my 10th reread, and it was The Lost Days by Emily the Strange. I love Emily the Strange so much, and I haven't reread these books in I think like 5 years, so I'm doing a reread of all of them. It is definitely not for adults, so just letting you know that off the bat. Emily the Strange was one of my favorite characters growing up. I loved the books, I loved the comic, but basically there's this 13-year-old girl. She's goth queen, love her so much, and she's like a mad scientist, and in this book she has amnesia and she wakes up in this random town called Black Rock, and she's just trying to figure it out. I love these books. There's illustrations throughout. It's a diary similar to Diary of a Wimpy Kid but for weirder people, I guess. 5-star read. Would honestly, if you're an adult and you haven't read the Emily the Strange books, I still recommend reading them. I think they're so fun. Obviously it's a really quick read, and I love Emily the Strange. I actually have started the second one now, so I'm reading Stranger and Stranger. Moving on, the next book I read was The Wicked King by Holly Black. So first I bought The Cruel Prince, which is the first book in this trilogy. Probably when I was in high school, honestly, and then I never got around to reading it until a few years ago. So when I went into The Wicked King, I actually didn't really remember much from The Cruel Prince, but although I don't really read these kinds of books anymore, I did want to finish the trilogy. I think there's a 4th book, but it's a novella ? Anyway, so I kind of dived into this book without really remembering anything from The Cruel Prince. I tried to read like a summary to remember what happened. I didn't want to reread The Cruel Prince. There's 3 daughters, 2 of them are twins, and they lived in the mortal world, and their mom, I guess, had an affair with some guy who lived in Fairy. He kills their mom and their dad and takes them to Fairyland. I think that's what it's called. There's princes, there's kings, there's fairies, lots of fun things. Honestly, I really did enjoy reading this. I think it's fun every once in a while. Dive into something you don't normally read. Moving on, I read How Much Land Does a Man Need by Leo Tolstoy. This is my first Tolstoy read. I understand that Tolstoy is polarizing. Many people do not like him, many people love him. Also own Anna Karenina, which I do eventually want to read, but I was like, you know what, this is perfect for a little introduction to Tolstoy. She's small, she's a penguin little black classic. There's 2 short stories in here. How Much Land Does a Man Need, and what was the other one called? What Men Live By. I liked What Men Live By much more than How Much Land Does a Man Need, but I enjoyed both of these stories. There's a lot of religion ideas in here. I wouldn't say I loved this book, but I did enjoy my time reading it. It's very short, but I think if you've never read Tolstoy, this would be a good read. I would recommend it, maybe, if you want to read Tolstoy. The next book I read in February was People from My Neighborhood by Hiromi Kawakami. This is a collection of short stories that all take place in one neighborhood, so by reading this you kind of get a sense of the whole neighborhood in here. There's repeating characters throughout the short stories. I will say though that none of the short stories in here really stood out to me too much. I thought it was cool and interesting that they were all kind of intertwined, but at the end of the day, kind of forgettable. I can barely remember what happened in here. I do remember that the neighborhood was weird and that there was weird stories, but that's all I can really remember. I do want to read other things by this author as well, so I think I will give other books a shot, but this was not my favorite. Continuing on with the Cruel Prince series trilogy, I read The Queen of Nothing. Okay, it says the Folk of the Air series, so maybe that other 4th thing is kind of part of it. I am gonna read it at some point, not right now, but enjoyed The Queen of Nothing. I actually really liked this trilogy overall series. Can't really say much about this because it's the final book, and I already kind of explained The Cruel Prince sort of, but I liked reading it. It was fun, it was quick. If you're interested in YA fantasy and have never read the Folk of the Air series, read it. I liked it. And my favorite book that I read in February, The Post Office Girl by Stefan Zweig. I loved this book so much. This is probably actually one of my favorite books I've ever read. I'm trying to show you. Can you see all the tabs in here? Like, it's actually crazy. So basically it is post-war. Okay, this girl, she is poor, so poor. She lives with her mother. She works at this post office. Her mother is sick, ill, not doing well. She barely has enough money to get by. She's living in poverty. That's basically the main thing on her mind, is that she's poor. And then the mother, the post office girl's aunt, reaches out to the mother and invites the daughter on a vacation for 2 weeks. The aunt and her husband are rich. She shows up to this hotel and is very anxious and very aware of her poverty when she arrives, but then she transforms into this whole different person. Money transformed her, okay? Then she has to go back into living in poverty. So then she has to go back to the post office and she meets this guy who is also poor, and they both share a lot of the same struggles. And basically you just see this girl, super poor, get to live in wealth and get thrown back into poverty. I loved this book so much. I recommend 5,000 times over. It is one of my favorite books I've ever read, and I think you should read it. After reading this, I want to read more from this author. I think next maybe I'll read Chess Story, but we'll see. That was all the books that I read in February. A very strange list of books. I feel like lots of not typical books for me, but I found a book I loved, and that's what matters. My next video will not be a book video, so sorry if you guys are not interested in books. Let me know what books you read in February, if you read any. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.